Have you ever seen someone treat a billionaire's mother with genuine kindness, not for money, but from the heart? In a world where everyone chases wealth and status, one humble waitress did something no one else dared to do. And that single act of compassion changed her life forever. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? Rain had washed Charleston clean that evening, leaving the streets glistening under amber street lamps. Inside Magnolia Diner, the hum of the old ceiling fan mixed with the faint crackle of a jazz tune leaking from the radio by the counter. The scent of fried chicken and fresh coffee hung in the air, soft and familiar. It was close to closing time, yet Clara Winslow was still moving as if the day had just begun, refilling salt shakers, wiping tables, smiling out of habit more than energy. Her shoes squeaked on the checkerboard floor, damp from customers tracking in the drizzle. She had been on her feet for 14 hours straight, the kind of exhaustion that settled in her bones. Still, she hummed quietly, a tune her younger sister liked to sign along to at home. The tips hadn't been good tonight, but they were enough to cover one more week of art supplies for Lila. That was all that mattered. Deborah Kane, the diner's manager, leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes sharp as cut glass. "Clara, wipe that front window again. It's streaked." "Yes, ma'am," Clara replied, already holding the rag. Deborah's voice always carried the tone of someone waiting for a mistake, the kind that made every worker tighten their shoulders. Outside, the rain eased into mist. Through the fogged-up glass, the neon sign flickered Magnolia Diner, the O, blinking every few seconds like a tired heartbeat. The dinner crowd was long gone. Only a trucker in the corner lingered over pie and black coffee. Clara set down the rag, hoping for a moment to rest her aching back. She thought about home, about Lila sitting by the window, sketching the rain, signing stories only her sister could understand. The bell above the door jingled, sharp against the soft music. Clara straightened instinctively, wiping her hands on her apron. Two figures entered, the kind of customers who didn't usually stop at a small diner like this. The man wore a dark gray suit, immaculate even after the rain. The older woman beside him had silver hair, pinned neatly, and eyes a striking green that missed nothing. Deborah was on them in seconds, smoothing her hair, her tone honeyed. "Good evening. Table for two? We're honored to have you, sir." The man nodded politely. "Thank you. Somewhere quiet, please." Clara led them to a booth near the window, noticing how the older woman's gaze drifted not toward the menu, but toward the reflection of the rain outside. She seemed distant, disconnected from the world around her. Clara's heart tightened with recognition. She'd seen that look on Lila's face too many times when people forgot she was listening in her own way. As Clara handed the menus, the man glanced up. "Whiskey neat for me. My mother will have white wine Chardonnay if you have it." "Yes, sir," Clara said softly, but her attention was on the mother, who hadn't looked up. She stared out at the glass, fingers fidgeting on the napkin. Clara waited a moment. Then she stepped closer, and without thinking twice, moved her hands gracefully through the air. "Good evening, ma'am. It's nice to have you here." The woman turned as if struck by sunlight. Surprise, then joy spread across her face. She lifted trembling fingers to reply. "You sign?" Clara nodded. "My sister's deaf," she signed back. "It's my favorite language." The older woman's eyes filled with warmth, and for the first time that night, she smiled a real, radiant smile that softened every line of her face. The man looked between them, stunned. You know sign language?" "Yes, sir. My sister taught me," Clara answered aloud, still signing so his mother could follow. In that small booth, something shifted. The invisible wall that had kept the elegant woman apart from the world dissolved. They laughed softly, signing back and forth about the weather, the rain, the pie that smelled too good to resist. The man watched, phone forgotten, as his mother glowed with life he hadn't seen in years. When Clara returned to the counter, Deborah's voice snapped like a whip. "What was that?" "Just talking to the lady, ma'am." "With your hands? Don't get fancy, Clara. These folks expect service, not whatever that was." "Clara bit Heartwarming." "Yes, Mom." But as she turned away, she caught the older woman's reflection in the window, smiling, signing thank you across the room. And for the first time in a long while, Clara felt seen too. The orders came out slow that night, Clara carried the steaming plates herself, careful not to spill the soup or let the coffee overflow. Each time she approached the booth, she saw the older woman Maggie. She'd learned signing small phrases of gratitude, her green eyes alive with amusement. Nathaniel Cross, the son, seemed both protective and quietly fascinated, as though the evening had slipped beyond the control of his structured world. When Maggie tasted the salmon Clara had recommended, she closed her eyes in delight. "Perfect," she signed, and Nathaniel laughed softly, almost surprised by the sound of his own laughter. Clara joined in. It was an easy human sound that filled the diner more warmly than the jazz on the radio ever could. At the counter, Deborah watched them with thin-lipped irritation. She whispered to a busboy, "She thinks she's some kind of miracle worker." Clara could feel the words even if she couldn't hear them, but she chose to keep smiling. She poured another glass of wine, made sure Maggie's napkin was neatly folded, and kept signing as naturally as breathing. For the next 2 hours, time seemed to lose shape. The usual clang of dishes, the hum of the fluorescent lights, everything faded behind their gentle conversation. Maggie told Clara, in signs quick but graceful, that she had lost her hearing when her son was 10. Clara responded that her sister Lila had been born deaf, and that silence could be beautiful if people would only listen differently. Maggie's laughter came like a small burst of sunlight. Nathaniel sat quietly, watching his mother's hands move with energy and purpose. His eyes softened. The weight of years spent in hurried boardrooms, endless meetings, fell away for a moment. "I can't remember the last time I saw her this happy," he murmured. Clara smiled. Maybe she just needed someone to speak her language. When dessert came, a slice of pecan pie shared between them, Maggie insisted Clara take a bite. "You helped make this night sweet," she signed. The simple kindness in that gesture brought heat to Clara's cheeks. She didn't know why she felt suddenly shy, almost as if she were intruding on something sacred. As they prepared to leave, Maggie rose unsteadily, then reached for Clara's hand. Her palm was cool, her touch certain. She signed slowly. "You have a gift. Thank you for seeing me." Clara's throat tightened. "The pleasure was mine, ma'am. I hope to see you again." Nathaniel paid the bill without looking at the total. "Keep the change," he said quietly, his gaze lingering on Clara just long enough to say something his words couldn't. Then he offered his arm to his mother and walked her toward the door. The bell jingled as it closed behind them, the sound oddly final in the hush that followed. Deborah appeared from the kitchen, her heels clicking like sharp punctuation marks on the tile. "Well," she said, arms folded, "that was quite a performance." Clara wiped the counter, pretending calm. "I was just doing my job." "Your job," Deborah snapped, "is to serve, not start a show. Those people don't come here for charity cases or hand flapping. Remember that." Clara met her eyes, her voice steady. "I wasn't giving charity, ma'am. Just respect." Deborah's face hardened. "Be here at 5 a.m. tomorrow. You can clean the bathrooms before opening." When she was finally alone, Clara exhaled slowly, her shoulders trembling from the weight of the day. She switched off the neon sign, leaving only the dim glow from the counterlight. Outside, rain began again, gentle, forgiving. Through the glass, the reflection of the empty booth shimmered faintly. She could still see Maggie's smile there, faint but real, like a memory etched in light. Clara hung her apron, grabbed her coat, and stepped into the cool night. The air smelled of wet pavement and magnolia leaves. She pulled the collar up against her neck and started toward the bus stop, tired but somehow lighter than before. Down the street, headlights glided past and disappeared. A quiet peace followed her through the rain. She didn't know why her heart beat faster, or why she felt as though she'd just opened a door she hadn't realized was locked. As Nathaniel and his mother left, Clara didn't know her small gesture had already started a ripple in a world far above her own. Morning came softly over Charleston, washing the cobblestone streets in pale gold. The river shimmered, calm and wide, as though the city itself had decided to forgive the night's rain. Clara sat by the bus window, her reflection faint against the glass. Her eyes were tired but bright, carrying the quiet kind of hope that only appears after long struggle. Lila was still asleep when she left the apartment sketchbook on her lap, headphones tucked loosely over her ears. Their little home above the laundromat was cramped but full of warmth. Potted plants by the window, art supplies stacked neatly in old cookie tins, and a faint smell of cinnamon from yesterday's toast. Clara had scribbled a note before leaving. "Don't forget your scarf. It's chilly today." At the diner, the smell of coffee was already brewing when she pushed the door open. Deborah Kane was there before her, counting bills at the counter, her lips pressed into a thin, determined line. "You're late," she said without looking up. "It's 6:03, ma'am," Clara replied softly. "Then you're 3 minutes late. And after that little show last night, you'd better prove you're still focused." Clara bit back a sigh and slipped into her routine tie the apron, polish the counter, refill the sugar jars. Around her, the other waitresses whispered small-town gossip about whose husband got a new truck, or which neighbor had been seen sneaking pie from the diner's back door. Clara half listened, half dreamed. Her mind kept returning to the woman from last night, Maggie Cross, and her gentle smile, the way her hands moved like poetry. The bell over the door chimed again. Morning regulars filed in. Mr. Cole, who read the paper without ever ordering more than one egg. The Jenkins twins, already arguing over football. Clara greeted them all with her usual calm kindness. "Morning, folks. Coffee's hot, seats are open." Oh. A few hours later, the quiet of mid-morning settled over Magnolia Diner. Clara was wiping down the pie display when a courier walked in, rain still clinging to his jacket. "Delivery for Miss Winslow," he called. Deborah's head snapped up. "We don't get deliveries for staff." The man shrugged. "Name's on the envelope." Clara wiped her hands and approached. The courier handed over a cream-colored envelope embossed with gold lettering, no return address, only her name written in neat script. She turned it over, uncertain. "Must be a mistake," she murmured. "Open it," Deborah ordered, curiosity sharp beneath her disapproval. Inside was a folded note on heavy stationery. The handwriting was firm, elegant. "Miss Winslow, I wanted to thank you again for your kindness to my mother. She spoke of you all night. We're hosting a small gala this weekend to celebrate her foundation's anniversary. My mother insists that you attend as our guest. I would be honored if you accepted. Nathaniel Cross." Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she reread the lines. She could almost hear the way Maggie had laughed at the diner, could see those eyes full of life. But a gala? In their world? It felt like a window to a place she didn't belong. Deborah leaned forward, eyebrows arching. "Well, aren't you something? Guess your little signing trick caught someone's attention." "It wasn't a trick," Clara said, her voice quiet but steady. Deborah smirked. "You planning to go? Because I don't think folks like us fit in with people like them." Clara folded the letter carefully, pressing it close to her chest. "I haven't decided yet." She worked the rest of the shift in silence. Every clink of dishes, every refill of coffee, came with the faint echo of that invitation. Guest. The word lingered like perfume, sweet but dangerous. When her shift finally ended, she walked home through streets lined with golden leaves. Her paycheck, folded in her apron, felt lighter than usual, though she couldn't say why. As she passed a shop window, her reflection caught her eye. A young woman with tired hands, a second-hand coat, and something almost like hope glowing behind her weariness. That night, while Lila painted quietly at the table, Clara told her about the letter. Lila's eyes widened. She signed excitedly, "You should go." "I don't even have the right clothes." Clara laughed. "Borrow. Make something. But you have to go, Clara." Clara smiled, brushing her sister's hair back. The truth was, she wanted to. She just didn't know if she dared. The next evening, Charleston's air turned cooler, carrying the faint scent of salt from the harbor. Inside the apartment, Clara sat by the sewing machine that had once belonged to their mother. A pale blue dress, hand-me-down from a neighbor, lay spread across her lap. She had taken in the sides, hemmed the skirt, and added a line of lace along the neckline. It wasn't new or glamorous, but it was hers. Lila perched on a stool beside her, sketching. She signed with quick, excited movements. "You'll look beautiful, like the ladies in your old movies." Clara smiled. "Maybe not quite that," she said aloud, returning the sign so her sister could follow. "It's just a dinner, nothing fancy." "Then why are your hands shaking?" Lila teased, grinning. Clara laughed softly and stopped the machine. She stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror near the window. Plain face, tired eyes, and a faint spark of nervous joy. "Maybe because it's been a long time since anyone invited me anywhere," she whispered. On Friday afternoon, a small black car pulled up outside the diner. Deborah watched from the doorway as a driver in a dark suit stepped out, asking for Miss Winslow. The other waitresses froze mid-motion, One even dropped her tray. Deborah's expression twisted between envy and disbelief. Clara untied her apron. "I'll be back tomorrow," she said quietly. "Oh, I'm sure you will," Deborah replied, her voice dripping with sweetness sharp enough to cut. "Try not to embarrass us little folks, darling." The ride felt surreal. Charleston's narrow streets sliding by like painted memories. Clara held the invitation in her lap, smoothing it over and over as if it might vanish. Her heart thumped with the rhythm of the tires. Outside, the city glowed. Lanterns on porches, church bells in the distance, the scent of pecan pie from a bakery she used to clean on weekends. They stopped before a mansion that shimmered beneath strings of white lights. Music drifted from within violins and soft laughter. She stepped out, clutching her small purse, trying not to stare at the grand staircase, the marble columns, the people in silks and tuxedos. At the entrance, a woman with a clipboard asked for her name. When Clara answered, the woman smiled kindly. "Ah, Miss Winslow, Mr. Cross mentioned you. Please, right this way." The ballroom opened like a dream chandeliers, scattering gold across the room, the smell of roses and champagne filling the air. Waiters moved silently between tables, carrying trays of crystal glasses. Clara stood at the edge, unsure of where to go, her hands clasped tightly. Then she saw her, Maggie Cross, radiant in a silver gown, turning toward the door as if she had been waiting all evening for this exact moment. Her face lit up, and she began to sign joyfully across the crowd. "You came!" Clara smiled and stepped forward, answering the same way. "I wouldn't miss it." Nathaniel appeared beside his mother, looking less like the polished executive she'd met before, and more like a son at peace. "Clara," he greeted, genuine warmth in his voice. "I'm glad you came." "Ah, thank you for inviting me," she replied, glancing around. "This is beyond beautiful." "Everything my mother touches turns that way," Nathaniel said with a small smile. "Come, she wants to introduce you to a few people." They crossed the ballroom together. The chandeliers glittered above them like constellations. Clara felt every pair of eyes turn as they passed, curiosity whispering through the crowd, but Maggie squeezed her hand reassuringly. When they reached the dais, Maggie signed something quickly to her son. Nathaniel turned to Clara. "She says she hasn't felt this alive in years, and that's because of you." Clara's throat tightened. She blinked hard, smiling through it. "Tell her, she's the one who made me believe again." Behind them, the music swelled, and the crowd began to applaud for reasons she didn't yet understand. A man at the microphone announced the start of the foundation ceremony, but Clara's mind was far away back in the diner, in the hum of ordinary nights that suddenly didn't feel so small anymore. And as the lights dimmed to a golden haze, Clara realized something she hadn't dared to admit before. Kindness, given freely, can open doors even the heart had forgotten were there. The gala had ended hours ago, but the shimmer of its music seemed to follow Clara all the way home. She walked the quiet Charleston streets under a low moon, shoes in hand, the hem of her thrift-stitched dress brushing against damp leaves. The scent of jasmine hung in the air. She could still hear Maggie's laughter echoing in her mind, light, unguarded, free. When she unlocked the apartment, the faint click of the door woke Lila. Her sister stirred from the couch, sketchbook sliding to the floor. "How was it?" she sighed sleepily. Clara smiled, easing beside her, like something out of a dream. "Did they treat you kindly?" "Better than kindly," Clara signed back. They listened. Lila grinned and leaned her head on Clara's shoulder. The silence between them was full, the good kind, warm, shared, complete. Outside, a streetlight flickered. Somewhere, a train whistle drifted over the river. By morning, Charleston was bustling again. Clara returned to the diner, apron tied neatly, hair pulled back. The same regulars filled the booths. The same smell of coffee, bacon, and hope lingered in the air. But something inside her had shifted. Deborah noticed first. "You're smiling too much," she said. "People will think we serve joy with the pancakes." Clara laughed softly. "Maybe that wouldn't be so bad." Near noon, a familiar black car pulled up outside. Heads turned as a man in a gray suit stepped through the door. Nathaniel Cross. He looked out of place among the vinyl booths, and neon lights like a painting hung in the wrong museum. Deborah's voice rose, syrup sweet. "Mr. Cross, What an honor. But Nathaniel's eyes searched only for Clara. He approached her counter with a smile that carried a touch of embarrassment. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Clara said, startled. Is your mother well? She's wonderful, actually. She's the reason I'm here. He set a small envelope on the counter. She's hosting a private luncheon next week for a few supporters of her new foundation. She'd like you to be there officially this time. Clara frowned slightly. Officially? He nodded. She wants you to help interpret. She's decided the event will include members of the deaf community, and, well, she refuses to trust anyone else. Clara hesitated. I don't know if I'm qualified. You're more than qualified, Nathaniel said gently. You make people feel seen. My mother says that's rarer than any degree. Deborah appeared at Clara's elbow. She's already scheduled that day, she said sharply. Clara turned. It's my day off. Then I'll need you here, Deborah snapped. Nathaniel's tone cooled, polite but firm. I'll personally see she's compensated for the hours missed. Deborah's expression faltered. Of course, sir, she said, retreating with a forced smile. Clara looked down at the envelope. Inside lay another elegant card, embossed with gold lettering. Her name again. This time, beneath it, a single line handwritten in neat script. Because you remind me of what listening truly means. Maggie C. Something fluttered inside Clara's chest. Surprise, humility, gratitude. She met Nathaniel's eyes. Please tell her I'll come, he smiled. I think she already knows. When he left, the diner's doorbell chimed its small metallic tune. Deborah glared, but even she couldn't dim the quiet glow on Clara's face. Outside, autumn leaves swirled past the window, golden against the gray street. The city seemed suddenly larger, as if somewhere within its folds, a new chapter was waiting to be written. The days that followed moved gently, like ripples across still water. Every evening after her shift, Clara sat by the kitchen table, practicing sign language in front of the mirror while Lila corrected her with exaggerated expressions. The younger sister's hands moved fast, teasing but precise. Slow down, Clara, she sighed, laughing. You're talking like a hummingbird. Clara giggled, shaking her head. Maybe I'm just nervous. Nervous is good, Lila answered. It means you care. By Friday, the day of the luncheon, Charleston wore its prettiest face. The sun glowed pale over the harbor, and the air smelled of salt and magnolia blossoms. Clara stood outside the Cross estate once more, this time not as a guest lost among strangers, but as someone with a purpose. She smoothed her thrift store dress, whispered a small prayer, and stepped through the arched doorway. Inside, the world sparkled again. Crystal vases, linen drapes, sunlight pouring through tall windows. But today, the crowd was smaller, quieter. Maggie sat at a round table surrounded by a mix of business people and guests, signing cheerfully among themselves. The sound of conversation mingled with the graceful rhythm of moving hands. Maggie looked up, and her face lit with that same joy Clara remembered from the diner. She waved her over, signing quickly, You came back. I wouldn't have missed it, Clara replied, smiling. For the next 2 hours, Clara helped interpret between Maggie and the guests, translating questions, laughter, and heartfelt stories. The air shimmered with warmth. It wasn't the stiff elegance of the gala, it was human, generous, alive. At one point, Maggie introduced Clara to a woman from the State College's Deaf Studies department. She told me, Nathaniel translated quietly, that if you ever want formal training, they'd welcome you. Clara froze. Training? For me? Maggie nodded, signing slowly. You could help so many. Don't doubt yourself. The compliment hit deeper than Clara expected. She thought of her mother's old sewing machine, of Lila's patient hands, of the years spent surviving one double shift after another. Maybe kindness didn't just pass through people, it could root itself and grow. After the luncheon, Nathaniel walked her to the garden. The air shimmered with late afternoon light, golden against the ivy walls. My mother talks about you constantly, he said. She's easy to talk to, Clara answered, smiling. She says you remind her of herself before my father passed. She used to believe small gestures could save the world. Maybe they still can, Clara said softly. Nathaniel looked at her then, truly looked, the way a man does when he's realizing something unfamiliar and frighteningly tender. She was right, he said quietly. You make people listen. Clara didn't know what to say. She lowered her gaze, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. A breeze rustled through the garden, carrying the faint scent of sea and honeysuckle. Somewhere beyond the hedges, laughter drifted from the house. "Thank you," she said at last, "for trusting me today." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "I should be the one saying that." When the car dropped her home that evening, the sun was sinking behind the rooftops. Lila waited by the window, waving both hands the way she did when she couldn't contain her joy. Clara signed through the glass. "It went well." Her sister beamed. "I knew it would." Later, when the city had gone quiet, Clara lay awake, listening to the hum of the street below. The world felt wider now, like a door slowly opening. She wasn't sure where it led, but for the first time, she wanted to find out. By mid-October, Charleston shimmered beneath amber leaves and soft breezes that carried the faint scent of baked apples from the market stalls. At Magnolia Diner, the ceiling fan turned lazily, its hum mixing with the low chatter of the breakfast crowd. The city had begun to cool, but the warmth of everyday life pulsed steady through the morning air. Clara wiped down a table near the window, her mind half lost in thought. The luncheon with Maggie Cross had left a mark, a gentle one, but lasting. Since then, she'd begun receiving short notes from the foundation, little thank you cards written in looping cursive. "You made everyone feel seen. Let's talk again soon." They were signed simply M. Deborah noticed the change, of course. "You're walking around like you swallowed sunlight," she said, her voice lined with sarcasm. "Careful, sweetheart. Too much hope will make you forget where you came from." Clara only smiled. "I remember exactly where I came from. That's what keeps me grateful." M. Around noon, a familiar car rolled to a stop outside the diner. Nathaniel Cross stepped out, less polished today, jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from something deeper than work. He waited until Clara finished taking an order before approaching the counter. "Rough morning?" she asked softly. He gave a short laugh. "You could say that. My mother has me reorganizing the entire foundation staff. She's convinced we can do more." Sounds like she's right." He smiled, faintly. "She usually is." He hesitated, then added, "Actually, she'd like to invite you again this time to the Foundation's autumn gala. It's important to her. To both of us." Clara froze mid-motion, cloth still in her hand. "Mr. Cross, I don't belong at something like that." "It's Nathaniel," he said gently. "And yes, you do. You helped start it. This whole initiative, inclusion, interpretation, accessibility. It's because of you." Deborah appeared suddenly beside them, pretending to refill the sugar jars. "A gala, is it? Well, aren't we climbing ladders?" "Just trying to make the world a little fairer," Clara replied quietly. Nathaniel looked between them, then met Clara's eyes. "Please say you'll come. I don't even have a dress," she said, half laughing. "I'll have someone handle that," he offered. "You shouldn't worry about the small things." When he left, the diner buzzed with whispers. Clara went about her work pretending not to notice. But inside, her stomach fluttered with something between fear and excitement. That night, at the apartment, she told Lila everything. Her sister's eyes widened. "A gala, like in the movies?" Clara nodded, signing back with a smile. "Apparently so. And you'll go, right?" Lila pressed. Clara hesitated. "What if I make a fool of myself? What if I don't fit in?" Lila laughed, signing quickly. "You'll fit in because you belong there. You make people happy, that's what they'll remember." The next day, a package arrived at their door, pale blue tissue paper, gold ribbon, and a card written in neat handwriting. "For a night where kindness deserves to shine. Maggie Cross." Inside lay a gown of soft ivory silk, simple but elegant, and a pair of low-heeled shoes. Clara ran her fingertips over the fabric, her heart pounding. "It's too much," she whispered. Lila signed, "It's perfect. And so are you." They both laughed until their eyes welled with tears. Outside, Charleston's evening sky turned gold, then rose, then deep indigo. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour, and in that quiet apartment above the old street, two sisters sat close, one dreaming for the first time in years, the other watching, proud, as her dream began to take shape. The night of the gala arrived beneath a velvet Charleston sky. Street lamps shimmered on the rain-polished pavement as the car pulled away from the Winslow's modest building. From the back seat, Clara pressed her hands together in her lap, breathing deeply. The dress Maggie had sent draped around her like moonlight, and for once, her reflection in the window didn't look like a waitress hurrying home after midnight. She looked possible. When the driver opened her door at the Cross Estate, a wave of laughter and music rolled out into the night. The mansion was strung with white lights, glowing like something out of a storybook. Clara hesitated on the steps until a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Nathaniel. He smiled as he saw her, that tired look replaced by something soft, almost tender. "You made it," she laughed nervously. "Wouldn't dare refuse your mother. She would have come to fetch you herself," he said, offering his arm. Inside, the ballroom had been transformed again, autumn leaves woven into garlands, candles floating in crystal bowls, a live band playing gentle jazz. The crowd sparkled with sequins and tuxedos, but when Maggie spotted Clara, she abandoned her table and hurried forward, graceful despite her years. Her hands moved fast. "You're beautiful," Clara blushed, signing back. "You too. Thank you for all of this." Maggie touched her heart, then pointed to Clara's. "You earned it." Nathaniel stood watching, quiet admiration in his eyes. "You know," he said softly, "I've seen my mother surrounded by people for years, but I haven't seen her truly happy until you came along." Clara smiled shyly. "She's easy to make happy. You just have to listen." "Then maybe that's something I should learn to do," he murmured. As the evening unfolded, Clara found herself helping guests converse with Maggie, interpreting stories, laughter, and even a few heartfelt confessions. The ballroom buzzed with life, hands signing, voices mingling, hearts opening. It wasn't just a party anymore. It was a kind of bridge, a promise that everyone could belong. During dinner, Nathaniel took the stage to welcome everyone. His speech was poised, but when he spoke of his mother's resilience and the inspiration behind the Foundation's new inclusion program, his voice wavered slightly. "And I owe that spark to someone very special," he said, glancing toward Clara. The room turned to follow his gaze. "A woman who reminded us that compassion is not an act of charity, it's the language of humanity." Clara's cheeks flushed. She lowered her gaze, trying not to cry. Maggie reached out under the table and squeezed her hand. When the applause faded, Nathaniel stepped down and joined them again. "Sorry," he whispered. "Didn't mean to embarrass you." "You didn't," Clara said softly. "You just surprised me." Later, as the crowd drifted toward the dance floor, Maggie excused herself to greet a friend, leaving the two of them by the veranda doors. The night air spilled in cool, sweet with honeysuckle. From where they stood, the garden glowed with lanterns swaying gently in the breeze. Nathaniel looked out at the lights. "You ever think about how one moment changes everything? A chance meeting, a simple gesture, and suddenly your whole path shifts." Clara nodded. "All the time." He turned to her, eyes searching. "I think that's what you've done for us. For me." She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a waiter rushed over, out of breath. "Mr. Cross, excuse me, there's a problem with the Foundation files. Your mother asked for you." Nathaniel's calm composure faltered for a moment. He nodded quickly. "Of course, I'll handle it." Then to Clara quietly, "Please don't leave yet." "No." As he disappeared into the crowd, Clara stepped out onto the veranda, the night wrapping around her like a whisper. She watched the garden lights flicker against the dark. Somewhere inside, a new melody started, one of belonging, of possibility, of a heart daring to believe it could be seen. The morning after the gala, Charleston felt washed clean. Rain had swept through at dawn, leaving the streets glistening and the air cool enough to taste. From her apartment window, Clara watched the city wake shopkeepers raising blinds, a paperboy peddling past puddles, the distant clang of a church bell rolling over the rooftops. Lila padded into the kitchen in her slippers, signing sleepily. "So, tell me everything." Clara poured 2 cups of coffee. "It was beautiful," she signed back, smiling softly. "Like a dream I didn't know I'd been having." "And him?" Lila teased with a grin. "The fancy man with the shy smile?" Clara laughed. "Nathaniel? He's kind. Stubborn, too. But kind." The laughter faded as her thoughts drifted back to the look he'd given her on the veranda. the words he hadn't had time to finish. Something gentle had been blooming there, something she didn't dare name. By the time she reached Magnolia Diner, the breakfast rush was already fading. Deborah stood at the counter, flipping through receipts with sharp, quick motions. Her lipstick was brighter than usual, her smile thinner. "Look who finally decided to join the common folk," she said. Clara hung up her coat. "Good morning, Deborah." "Morning, Miss Gala." The words landed like a pin on porcelain. "Heard you were the star of the show last night. The papers even mentioned your name. Local waitress turned interpreter inspires billionaire heir. Quite the fairy tale." Clara froze. "The papers?" Deborah slid a folded copy of the Charleston Chronicle across the counter. There it was, a small photo from the gala. Nathaniel, Maggie, and Clara laughing together under a chandelier. The caption read, "Kindness Speaks. The Cross Foundation announces new inclusion program." "It's just a mention," Clara said quietly. "Sure," Deborah replied, voice dripping sweet poison. "Just remember who signs your checks. People like us don't get fairy tales, Clara. We get shifts and tips." For the first time, the diner felt smaller, the air heavier. Clara worked in silence for the rest of the morning, the clatter of dishes louder than usual. When she finally stepped outside during her break, the sky had turned pale gray, heavy with humidity. She leaned against the brick wall, eyes closed, trying to steady herself. Her phone buzzed a text from Nathaniel's assistant, Patricia. "Good afternoon, Miss Winslow. Mr. Cross asked if you'd be available for a meeting tomorrow at the foundation office. He'd like to discuss a proposal." Clara's heart lifted, then stumbled over the word proposal. She texted back a polite yes, hands trembling slightly. That evening, she told Lila about it. Her sister's eyes widened. "Maybe he wants to offer you a job." Clara shook her head, smiling faintly.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
"You deserve it," Lila signed firmly. "You've worked harder than anyone I know." Still, when Clara went to bed, sleep refused to come. She lay staring at the ceiling fan, turning lazily above her, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. For the first time, hope felt heavy, a fragile, dangerous thing she was afraid to hold too tightly. The next day, she arrived at the foundation's office, a renovated brick building near the riverfront. The walls inside gleamed with photographs of smiling children and volunteers. Patricia greeted her warmly and led her upstairs to a glass-walled conference room. Nathaniel was already there, sleeves rolled up, papers scattered across the table. "Clara," he said, standing to meet her, "I'm glad you came." "I'm curious," she admitted, her voice light but her pulse racing. He gestured toward a folder. "I want you to look at something. It's an outline for a new program, one that would train interpreters for hospitals and schools across the state. My mother thinks you'd be perfect to lead it." Clara blinked. "Lead it?" Nathaniel nodded. "With a full salary and staff. You've already done the hardest part. You showed us what compassion looks like." Her throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said with a smile that was both hopeful and sincere. And for a moment, Clara believed she could. Clara left the foundation office feeling lightheaded. The streets shimmered under the late afternoon sun, and yet her thoughts spun like autumn leaves in a gust. Director of a new program? It felt unreal, too large, too bright for someone who'd spent her life counting tips. That night, she told Lila, who nearly spilled her cocoa in delight. "This is your chance," she signed quickly. "You've earned it." Clara smiled, but her eyes wavered. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "What if I fail? What if I'm not ready?" Her sister shook her head, pressing her hands over Clara's. "You're more ready than anyone." The next morning at Magnolia Diner, whispers followed her like perfume. Deborah stood near the counter, a false smile carved on her face. "So it's true," she said. "Our little Clara's going to be a big shot now." "It's just a discussion," Clara replied calmly. Deborah leaned closer, voice low and sharp. "Be careful with people like him. They'll use you for their image and drop you when they're done." The words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. All day, Clara worked in silence, her thoughts echoing between fear and hope. When she stepped out that evening, the sunset burned orange over the harbor and the air smelled of rain. Her phone buzzed a message from Nathaniel. "My mother is thrilled about your decision. We both are. Let's make something beautiful together." Clara stood on the sidewalk, staring at the screen, unsure whether to smile or cry. For the first time, her dream no longer felt like a dream. It felt like a test. The rain came back to Charleston, soft and steady, drumming against the diner's tin awning like a weary lullaby. Inside, the smell of coffee and fried eggs hung in the air as Clara tied her apron for what she didn't realize would be one of her last shifts there. She moved through the motions, pouring refills, wiping counters, but her mind wandered to the foundation office, to Maggie's gentle smile and Nathaniel's quiet conviction. The promise of a new beginning felt close enough to touch. Yet here she was, back under the flickering light of Magnolia Diner, pretending that nothing had changed. Deborah, meanwhile, had grown quieter in a way that wasn't peace but pressure. She no longer scolded or sneered. Instead, she watched every step Clara took, every word she spoke. The silence felt sharper than any insult. Around noon, 2 women from a local newspaper came in for lunch. They recognized Clara instantly. "You're the interpreter from the Cross Gala," one of them said, smiling. "That was such a beautiful story. You've inspired a lot of people." Clara smiled modestly. "Thank you, but I was just doing my job." "Oh, don't be modest," one replied. "They're saying you might be leading a whole program now." The diner went quiet. Forks froze midair. Deborah looked up from the register, her lips tightening into a hard line. After the reporters left, the silence stretched. Finally, Deborah spoke, her voice sugar-coated and dangerous. "So that's the plan? Leave us behind for your fancy friends?" Clara set down her tray carefully. "It's not about leaving. It's about doing something that matters." Deborah's laugh was sharp. "Don't fool yourself. People like them don't see people like us. They see a story, something to make them look kind." The words hit deep. Clara wanted to argue, but part of her feared Deborah was right. What if all of it, the invitations, the compliments, the job, was charity dressed as opportunity? That evening, after her shift, Clara walked home through the rain. The streets glowed gold beneath the lamps, puddles reflecting the city like scattered mirrors. Lila was waiting by the window, signing eagerly the moment Clara stepped in. "How was your day?" Clara hesitated. "Strange," she signed back. "People are starting to talk. Let them talk," Lila replied, fierce in her loyalty. "They don't know your heart." Clara smiled, but her hands trembled slightly as she hung up her wet coat. Outside, thunder rolled far away, the kind that seemed to echo something unspoken inside her. She couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Deborah's smirk, heard her voice whispering that cruel, believable truth. "They see a story, not you." But in the dark, another memory flickered Maggie's hands, signing, "You make people feel seen." Clara turned toward the window, rain tracing soft lines down the glass. Maybe, she thought, the truth depended on which voice she chose to believe. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through clouds, the color of pewter. At Magnolia Diner, the smell of cinnamon rolls couldn't hide the tension humming beneath the usual chatter. Word had spread fast. The local paper had printed a follow-up story about the Foundation's new program, and Clara's name was in the headline. Deborah was waiting when she walked in. "You've made quite a splash," she said coldly, waving the paper. "Front page of the community section. Must feel nice to be famous." Clara untied her scarf and tried to keep her voice steady. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," Deborah said, lips curling. "But you sure didn't turn it down, did you?" The morning dragged on, customers whispering, glancing at Clara with a mix of admiration and suspicion small towns reserved for sudden success. By lunchtime, the air felt heavy. When the doorbell chimed and Nathaniel Cross himself stepped in, every head turned. He smiled warmly. "Clara," he said, "I was nearby and wanted to drop this off." He handed her a thick envelope paperwork for her official offer letter. "Congratulations, Miss Winslow. You deserve this." It should have been a moment of joy, but Deborah's sharp voice sliced through it. "Deserve?" she said loudly. "You mean she's quitting without notice? Walking out on the people who gave her a job when no one else would?" The diner fell silent. Clara's throat went dry.
"That's not true,"
she whispered. "Oh, come now," Deborah continued, waving the paper in one hand. "Don't play innocent. You've been using this place for sympathy. Poor waitress with a deaf sister wins the pity of the rich." Gasps rippled through the room. Even Nathaniel looked stunned. Clara tried to speak, but the words tangled in her chest. "That's enough," Nathaniel said, voice firm. "You have no right." But Clara stopped him gently, her hands trembling. "It's fine," she said quietly. "She's not wrong about where I came from." She turned toward Deborah. "But you are wrong about why I tried. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to make a difference." Then she took off her apron, folded it neatly, and set it on the counter. "I'll save you the trouble of firing me," she said, voice trembling but clear. "Thank you for everything, Deborah." Without another word, Clara walked out into the sunlight, the bell above the door ringing softly behind her. Outside, the world was suddenly bright, too bright. She stood for a moment, breathing hard, heart pounding with both shame and relief. The envelope in her hand felt heavy, like a choice she hadn't meant to make so soon. At the corner, a gust of wind lifted a page from the newspaper and sent it fluttering past her feet. The headline caught her eye again, "Kindness Speaks." Clara stared at it for a long time, rain starting to fall again in tiny silver drops. Then, slowly, she smiled. Sometimes breaking is just the sound of something opening. The Cross Foundation's office overlooked the river, where the morning light spilled across the water like brushed gold. Clara stood at the window, coffee in hand, still half in disbelief that she worked there now not as a guest or volunteer, but as director of the new inclusion program. Her name was on the door. The letters were small and neat, but they made her pause every time she passed. Clara Winslow, program director. Her first week was a blur of meetings, paperwork, and training sessions. The staff, kind but curious, watched her with a mix of respect and quiet skepticism. They'd read the articles. They knew her story, or at least the version that had made it to print. Some nights she stayed late, reviewing files under the soft hum of the desk lamp. Maggie would often appear in the doorway, signing, "You're working too hard." Clara smiled and signed back, "I'm just catching up to everyone else." Maggie would chuckle silently, her eyes twinkling. "You belong here, Clara. Don't forget that." Nathaniel, meanwhile, was everywhere: meetings, press calls, fundraisers. When he was around, the air seemed to change, carrying that quiet confidence that both steadied and unsettled her. He treated her not as an employee, but as a partner, often seeking her opinion before his own. One evening after the others had gone, he stopped by her office. The sun had dipped low, painting the walls in amber light. "You've made my mother proud," he said softly. "She's made me braver," Clara replied. He smiled. "Then maybe we both owe her everything." They stood in a comfortable silence, the sound of distant traffic and seagulls filtering through the open window. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was tender, the kind of silence that speaks of something waiting to be said. The next morning brought its first real challenge. The Foundation's board convened for a quarterly review, a room full of polished shoes, sharp suits, and cautious eyes. Clara sat at the end of the long mahogany table, hands clasped in her lap. One of the older board members, Mr. Henley, cleared his throat. "Miss Winslow, I understand your intentions are noble, but why put so much funding toward deaf inclusion programs? That's a niche cause. We serve many communities." Clara straightened, heartbeat quickening. "Because inclusion isn't a niche, sir," she said evenly. "It's the foundation of empathy, and it's personal. Every barrier we remove helps someone's sister, someone's child, someone like my own." The room fell quiet. Then Maggie, seated beside Nathaniel, began to sign slowly, gracefully. Nathaniel translated aloud, "What Miss Winslow is building isn't charity, it's dignity. And if that's not our mission, I don't know what is." Applause rose hesitant at first, then firm. Clara exhaled, only then realizing how tightly she'd been holding her breath. Later that day, she found Maggie in her garden behind the office, pruning roses. The older woman smiled as Clara approached. "You were wonderful today," she signed. "I was terrified," Clara replied. "Good," Maggie answered, grinning. "Fear means you care enough to get it right." For the first time, Clara felt not like a visitor in this world, but part of its heartbeat. A week later, the autumn wind swept through Charleston with the faint smell of sea salt and rain. Clara was leaving the Foundation late one evening when she spotted a familiar figure waiting near the gate, Deborah. Her old manager stood with her arms crossed, a thin coat pulled tight around her shoulders. The sight froze Clara in place. "Didn't expect to see you here," Clara said quietly. Deborah's voice was dry. "You never came back to pick up your last paycheck. I thought I'd deliver it myself." Clara hesitated before accepting the envelope. "Thank you." Deborah didn't leave. "They talk about you, you know. The papers, the donors. You've become their little miracle. How's that feel?" Clara met her gaze steadily. "Unearned most days, but I'm learning." For a moment, neither woman spoke. The air between them was cold, heavy with unspoken history. Then Deborah sighed, the sound brittle as dry leaves. "I was cruel to you," she admitted. "I told myself it was tough love, but really, I was jealous. You never broke. I wanted to see you fail." Clara's heart softened. "We've all been hurt in our own ways," she said gently. "But I don't hold anger anymore. You helped me survive longer than you'll ever know." Deborah looked down, blinking hard. "You're better than I was." "No," Clara replied. "Just luckier to have people who believed in me." They stood there for a moment, the wind tugging at their sleeves. Then Deborah managed a small nod. "Take care of yourself, Clara." "I will," she said. "And thank you for bringing this." As Deborah turned and walked down the street, the lamplight caught her profile older, wearier, but somehow lighter too. When Clara returned inside, the building was nearly empty except for Maggie, who was arranging photos on a display board for an upcoming event. She looked up, eyebrows raised in question. Clara signed. "An old chapter closed tonight." Maggie smiled knowingly. "That's how new ones start." Later, Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled as usual. "You look like you just made peace with a ghost," he said softly. "Maybe I did," Clara answered. He smiled. "My mother says you can't build anything new while holding on to the old. Seems she was right again." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that came easily now. Outside, rain began to fall, not harsh, but cleansing, like the city was breathing again. As Clara looked out at the shimmering street, she felt something shift inside her, not triumph, not pride, but a quiet certainty. She had faced cruelty, doubt, and fear, and somehow turned them into grace. The tide had turned. Winter crept softly into Charleston, painting the mornings silver and quiet. The Cross Foundation had become Clara's second home. The hum of typewriters, the smell of fresh coffee, the low chatter of volunteers filling every hallway. But this morning felt different, special. The lobby buzzed with preparation for the Foundation's biggest event yet, the Winter Gala for Inclusion. Months of work had led to this night, the unveiling of a new scholarship program for deaf and hard-of-hearing students across the state. Clara stood at the base of the grand staircase, clipboard in hand, making last-minute checks. Her sister Lila stood beside her, dressed in a soft lavender gown, hair braided neatly. She signed excitedly. "I can't believe this! A real gala! For us!" Clara smiled, signing back. "For everyone. You're the heart of it, Lila. This started because of you." Lila rolled her eyes affectionately. "It started because you never gave up." When Maggie arrived, elegant in silver and pearls, the room seemed to glow. She greeted everyone with hugs and bright eyes, then found Clara immediately. Her hands moved quickly, joyfully. "I'm so proud of you." Clara signed back. "You showed me how to listen, to see people fully." Maggie touched her heart, eyes glistening. "You changed my son's world, and mine." Nathaniel appeared moments later, straightening his tie. He looked at Clara and smiled that familiar, quiet kind of smile that said more than words ever could. "You ready for tonight?" "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied. "Though I still get nervous." "Good," he said gently. "The right things always make us nervous." As evening fell, the ballroom came alive with light and music. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in gold, and guests from all over the state filled the tables. On stage, a large banner read, "Kindness Speaks, a Celebration of Connection." Clara moved between tables, greeting donors and guests, translating conversations with easy grace. Everywhere she looked, people were signing not perfectly, but trying, guided by interpreters and teachers the program had funded. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. Then, as the crowd quieted, Nathaniel stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and warm, "a year ago, this foundation took a new direction. one inspired by a single act of kindness in a small Charleston diner. He paused, eyes finding Clara in the front row. That act came from a woman who reminded us all that empathy is the language every heart understands. Applause filled the room, rolling like thunder. Clara felt her cheeks warm as Maggie urged her forward with a gentle nudge. She climbed the stage steps slowly, her heart beating loud in her chest. Nathaniel extended his hand. "Please welcome our director, Miss Clara Winslow." The applause grew louder, some clapping, others signing the gesture for applause, hands raised, fingers fluttering like light. Clara took the microphone, her voice trembling. "I'm not used to speeches," she said softly, smiling, "but I am used to listening." The room quieted. This foundation began with one small conversation. Between strangers, between a waitress and a woman, the world didn't bother to understand. Tonight, that same woman sits here as our heart, our reason, our proof that kindness never ends where it begins. Maggie wiped her tears, smiling proudly. Clara continued, her voice steady now. "This isn't about me. It's about every person who ever felt unheard, unseen, or forgotten. It's about second chances, and the belief that when we lift someone else, we rise too." The crowd rose in standing ovation, a sea of clapping and signing hands. Clara blinked through tears, feeling Lila's joy across the room, and Maggie's hands clasped in Nathaniel's. It was the sound and silence of love understood. The applause still lingered in the air long after Clara stepped down from the stage. She could feel it, not just the sound, but the warmth behind it, the kind of quiet approval that sinks deeper than noise. Nathaniel met her halfway, eyes bright with pride. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "You were—" Clara laughed shakily. "I thought my voice was trembling the whole time." "It was," he said, smiling. "But in the way truth always does." They stood there, surrounded by guests, by flashes of cameras and murmurs of congratulations. But the world seemed to fade until it was just them, the once lonely waitress, and the man who had learned how to truly listen. Later that night, when the speeches were done and the lights dimmed to a golden haze, Maggie took Clara and Lila out to the terrace overlooking the harbor. The sea shimmered under a rising moon, soft waves brushing against the pier below. Maggie turned to Lila first, signing slowly. "You remind me of my younger self, fierce, stubborn, full of art." Lila blushed, smiling. "And you remind me that growing older can be beautiful." Then Maggie faced Clara, eyes wet but glowing. "You gave me back my voice, child. You made my son a better man." Clara's throat tightened. "You gave me the courage to believe again." Nathaniel stepped out onto the terrace then, coat over his arm, the cool wind teasing through his hair. For a moment, no one spoke. The night hummed with the soft rhythm of water and distant jazz from the ballroom below. He looked at his mother, then at Clara. "I think we owe you both more than words," he said gently. "You've taught us that love in any language is the only thing that keeps the world standing." Maggie smiled knowingly, touching his cheek before slipping quietly back inside, linking arms with Lila as if to give them space. Clara leaned against the railing, looking out at the water. "I never thought life would lead me here," she said. "I spent years thinking the world didn't see people like us. Then I realized maybe we just needed to open our own doors." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "You didn't just open a door, Clara. You built one where there wasn't one before." The air between them grew still, full of all the words they hadn't said. When he finally reached for her hand, his touch was gentle, uncertain, but steady. "Clara," he began, voice low, "you've changed my mother's life. And mine. I keep trying to find a way to thank you, but everything I think of feels small." Clara turned to him, smiling faintly. "Maybe all you have to do is keep believing in what we built." "I do," he said. "But that's not all." He hesitated, searching her face. "I think I started believing in you long before I realized what it meant." For a moment, time seemed to stop. The city lights shimmered below, reflections dancing on the water like scattered stars. Then Clara spoke, barely above a whisper. "Nathaniel, I've spent my life taking care of others. My sister, my job, everyone who needed something. You're the first person who's ever looked at me and seen more than that." He smiled. "Maybe that's because there's so much more." And there, under the Charleston moon, he kissed her soft, sincere, full of everything they had both been too careful to say. The kind of kiss that doesn't shout, but promises. When they finally parted, the night was quiet except for the slow rhythm of the sea. Months passed. The foundation grew beyond anything they'd imagined. New interpreters, new schools, new programs bearing both Maggie's and Clara's names. The city that once ignored difference now celebrated it. At home, the sisters' small apartment had changed too. Lila's art filled the walls bright, joyful, full of hands and light. On the kitchen table sat a framed photo, the three of them at the gala, Maggie signing family, Nathaniel grinning, Clara mid-laugh. One Sunday morning, they all met by the harbor again. Maggie, now walking slower but smiling wider. Nathaniel, carrying a basket of pastries. Lila, sketchbook in hand. And Clara, barefoot on the sand, hair tangled by the wind. Maggie sat on a bench, watching the gulls swoop over the waves. She signed softly. You know, this is where I used to come when I felt alone. The world felt too big then. Now it feels just right. Clara smiled. Maybe because you filled it with love. Maggie reached out, taking her hand. No, my dear, you did that. Nathaniel spread a blanket nearby, laughing as Lila tried to feed a curious seagull. The morning light shimmered across the water, painting everything in hues of gold and blue. Clara looked around her at her sister's laughter, at Maggie's peace, at Nathaniel's quiet gaze, and realized she had finally come home. Not to a place, but to people. The waves whispered against the shore, carrying away the last echoes of doubt, of fear, of loneliness. She closed her eyes and breathed in the salt and sunlight, letting it fill her chest. Because some miracles don't arrive with trumpets or lightning. They begin quietly with a small act of kindness, a shared glance, a hand reaching out to be understood. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it too. The sound of love, speaking softly in every language the heart remembers. Sometimes, life brings us full circle from loneliness to belonging, from silence to understanding. Clara's journey began with a simple act of kindness in a small Charleston diner, and ended with a family built not by blood, but by love freely given. She didn't find wealth or power. She found connection, the kind that heals what time once broke. In her story, we're reminded that forgiveness is not forgetting the past, but learning how to walk through it with open hands. Like a porch light glowing on a quiet southern night, one gentle heart can guide another safely home. And maybe that's what redemption truly is, choosing to love even after the world has taught you not to. Because in the end, love doesn't need grand gestures. It lives in the small, steady moments. A shared meal, a kind word, a hand reaching out across years of distance. Just like Sunday suppers around an old wooden table where laughter mixes with memories and everyone finds their seat again. If this story touched your heart, press 1-inch the comments. If you think it could be told better, press 0 and tell us how you'd make it stronger. Your voice matters here too. And before you go, take a moment to think about someone you haven't reached out to in a while. A call, a letter, even a kind word. That's how we keep the light on for one another. If this story spoke to you, share it forward, so maybe it lights another porch tonight.